So Oregon Measure 114's firearms purchase permit and magazine ban have been blocked for right now, but that could all change at the beginning of January. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think a firearms purchase permit and magazine ban are clearly unconstitutional, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to thank everybody who's currently supporting the channel, who's subscribed to the channel, who likes the videos and comments on the videos. I appreciate all of your guys' support. This has been an amazing year. We've grown a ton. We've put out a ton of news here on the channel, and I just wanted to thank you all and hope you guys all had a Merry Christmas. And just wanted to mention that if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing to the channel. I know a lot of people watch a lot of videos but don't subscribe, and I hope that you would subscribe to the channel because that really does help the channel to grow and to reach and educate more people. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we will be discussing current challenges to Oregon Measure 114, which was originally set to go into effect on December 8th. This measure, which passed in the state of Oregon, creates a purchase permit that Oregon residents must obtain to be able to purchase firearms, and also it creates a ban on so-called large capacity magazines, or simply magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. In response to Measure 114, the state is now being sued in multiple cases. However, the case we will be focusing on in this video is called Arnold v. Brown. The Arnold case is a state lawsuit filed by Gun Owners of America, or GOA, and it challenges Oregon Measure 114 as a violation of the Oregon State Constitution. The last time we talked about the Arnold case, I informed you that the judge in that case extended the TRO, which barred the permit scheme, that permit to purchase scheme, from going into effect, and also he granted a preliminary injunction, which barred the magazine ban from also going into effect. This was a significant but temporary win in this case. However, there are some things that may now change at the beginning of January. Now, for those not familiar with Oregon Measure 114, let me explain generally what it does. Measure 114 will first require that anyone purchasing a firearm must obtain a permit to purchase. To obtain the permit to purchase, the resident will need to complete a safety training course, go through a background check, get fingerprinted, and then also show a valid ID, and only after that will you then get a permit to purchase. Under Measure 114, it will generally be unlawful to buy any firearms, to transfer any firearms, unless the person obtaining that firearm has a permit to purchase. That rule will also apply to private party transfers as well. To obtain a permit to purchase, you will need to go to your local police chief or your county sheriff to submit that application. To get the permit, you will need to go through that background check, have your fingerprints done, photo taken, pay a fee, present valid government ID, and also go through a firearms safety course. The fee for the application cannot exceed $65, so you're gonna have to pay $65 for the application, and then it's only good for 5 years, and then you will need to renew it and pay an additional $50 for that renewal. Now, under the measure, it will not be illegal for you to own a gun without a permit or to own those firearms that you already have, but you will have to get a permit to purchase to acquire any new firearms going forward. However, Measure 114 did not stop with just creating a purchase to permit requirement. The second significant thing that the measure does is that it will ban the sale, purchase, transfer, and possession of any so-called large capacity magazine. This measure makes a violation of the law a Class A misdemeanor, which is punishable by up to 364 days in jail and or a fine of up to $6,250. The magazine ban applies to any magazine that can be readily converted to accept more than 10 rounds. Under this measure, it is a prospective ban or a future ban on all so-called large capacity magazines. So they are going to grandfather some magazines in. But another thing that I want to point out is that this measure does have restrictions on how those grandfather magazines can be possessed, used, and transported. So under the measure, there are grandfather magazines, but there are restrictions and limitations on how you can use them. Now, one of the major issues with Measure 114 and the whole permitting scheme is that once it would go into effect on December 8th, it would have been next to impossible for anyone to even get that permit to purchase, and therefore for likely 30 days or even longer, people in the state of Oregon would have been barred from actually acquiring any new firearms. There would have been a complete halt on firearms purchases. That was because there was no structure in place to even support the processing of permits. There was no permit application that was even created, and there was no internal mechanism or online mechanism to where the state of Oregon could actually create this permit to purchase. In fact, the Attorney General sent out a letter at the pendency of this case and other cases and sent it out to all the judges, essentially admitting that there was no process in place. This then led to a federal court judge issuing a temporary halt on the permitting scheme from essentially going into effect for 30 days, only because the Attorney General had conceded that they have no process in place, and they likely are not going to have a process in place at least until, I believe, March. But then you had a Harney County Circuit Court judge, Judge Robert Roscio, who granted an outright TRO, halting the permitting scheme and magazine ban from going into effect. After that, the state of Oregon requested that the state Supreme Court overturn that decision of Judge Roscio. But in a surprising turn of events, the Supreme Court of Oregon ultimately denied the state's request. So that was a significant turn of events. And then subsequent to that, there was a hearing on the motion for a preliminary injunction before Judge Roscio in that state court case, which is Arnold. At the hearing, Judge Roscio upheld his order to temporarily restrain the permitting scheme from going into effect. At the hearing, he stated, "I'm going to continue the temporary restraining order with regards to the permit to purchase because I am convinced that there is irreparable harm to the constitutional right to bear arms under Article 1, Section 27 if I do not." Judge Roscio said his order would remain in effect until he received notice from the state of Oregon that the new permitting scheme was up and running and that they actually had something in place to implement this permitting scheme. After that hearing, he also issued an order granting the preliminary injunction, which now prevents the state of Oregon from putting in place their ban on so-called large capacity magazines. However, of course, the state of Oregon was not going to simply go away quietly. There was a hearing this last Friday on December 23rd. At the hearing, the state of Oregon put forward arguments for why a portion of Measure 114 should be allowed to go into effect. The state argued that Judge Roscio should allow Measure 114's background check requirements to go into effect right here and now. What the state wants is for a background check to be performed on all transactions, including private party transfers and also just simple transactions that maybe take longer than 3 days, and they claim this will close the so-called Charleston loophole. Under current federal law, firearms dealers can transfer the firearm that you're trying to obtain without the background check being cleared if it takes longer than 3 days, because under federal law, the FBI has 3 days to respond to your background check. The 3-day requirement is meant to ensure that under federal law that a buyer is not left waiting indefinitely, essentially, that they don't have to wait forever for a background check to clear, especially if it's on the end of the FBI where there is an undetermined or they're just taking forever. Then it actually allows you to be able to acquire that firearm. Now, GOA's attorneys argued at the hearing that this is an infringement because they will have the ability to simply slow walk background checks for as long as they want and simply not process them whatsoever. If this is allowed to go into effect, if this portion of Measure 114 goes into effect, essentially the state of Oregon can simply delay background checks for as long as they want. In response to that hearing, the judge indicated that he will in fact rule on this issue by January 3rd of next year. He will decide whether or not he will lift or continue the temporary restraining order that blocks Measure 114's regulation that requires completed background checks before a gun is actually sold and transferred to an individual. So that's currently what's happening in the state of Oregon with Measure 114. Like I mentioned, the magazine ban is currently halted and the permit to purchase is halted. But come January 3rd, the judge in that case will decide whether or not a portion of Measure 114 will go into effect, and that portion has to do with background checks and that requirement under Measure 114. So if we get any more information, I will let you all know. Also, if you like this video and like support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm or fuel Algor's rhythm. It adds fuel to his jet and signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys directly impacting these videos, impacting the channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. Also want to mention that tomorrow, December 27th, my local chapter of the CRPA, the California Rifle and Pistol Association, will be holding a membership meeting. That will be at the Visalia Sportsmen's Association, I believe. I will leave links down below if you want to attend. I will be there. Come support a good cause, especially if you're in the state of California and you're in the Tulare, Kings County area. I would love to see you there. I will be there, like I mentioned, and I will leave all the details down below if you want to attend. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation is built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.